I woke up that morning thinking it was just another Tuesday coffee feed. The animals load the truck, the kind of slow rhythm that makes you feel like time is on your side. Then I opened the gate and found an 8-foot iron fence bolted across my driveway like someone had decided to frame my life as an exhibit you weren't supposed to enter. No warning, no note on my door, just a stately black cage and a sheet of paper pinned to a post that might as well have said, "Welcome to our neighborhood." That was my hook. I laughed at first because what else do you do when someone tries to turn your driveway into a museum piece? Then the blood drained out of my face when I read the list of fines at the bottom: unauthorized gravel, illegal livestock, failure to maintain approved colors, and a number that would buy a real tractor. I didn't look for a fight. I'd never been that sort. But I'd been on this land longer than most of their newest homeowners had been alive, and when someone fences you in and presumes they own your life, something in you tightens. My family's been here since the 70s. My granddad poured his hands into this place after the war. Built the barn, patched fence posts, taught me how to mend a broken chain and how to tell rain by the smell of the dirt. 10 acres isn't a corporate enterprise. It's a life. We raise vegetables, keep a few goats, some chickens, and lately a couple of pigs, who have more personality than some people I know. The driveway is a deeded easement, a legal thread connecting my barn to the county road, and you don't mess with that without consequences. Tension had been simmering for years. A developer bought up land around us and built a neat subdivision of identical houses with airbrushed lawns. Their HOA president showed up one Saturday with a tight smile and a clipboard, and suddenly my tractor was an eyesore. "Couldn't you tidy up a bit?" she asked. I told her it was a working farm. She smiled like she'd heard a colorful joke and left. That was the polite beginning. The uncivil escalation came later. They started leaving notes, not real violation notices, just petty, presumptuous little things, and people from the subdivision began taking pictures of my barn like it was a piece in an architectural exhibit. Then overnight, the fence appeared. I stood in my truck, scratching my head as her car pulled up. She explained with military calm that the neighborhood had voted to secure the perimeter, and that if I wanted access, I'd have to sign their agreement, paint the barn, hide my tractor, move my animals, and pay fines that had magically accumulated. I called a lawyer. I called the sheriff. Both were polite. The lawyer said court would take weeks. The sheriff said it sounded like a civil dispute and to follow legal counsel. Meanwhile, a feed delivery that usually backed up to my barn sat on the public road. Company policy meant no hand deliveries, so I spent the afternoon carrying 50-pound bags over an 8-foot fence while people on evening walks watched some awkward most looking away. I could have waited for the law, or I could try to speed things up. So I called a surveyor, the good kind, not the cheap one, and he came out with his crew and gadgets and satellite overlays. His tablet lit up with lines and coordinates, and after 3 hours he handed me a certified report. The fence wasn't just near the property line, it was built 6 feet onto my land, deliberately positioned to catch my driveway. Whoever signed off on that location knew exactly what they were building. It was not a mistake. That evening, my lawyer helped me draft a notice demanding removal within 48 hours, or permission to remove it myself and invoice them for the work. I hired a process server. He served the HOA president at the next board meeting, handed the paper to her in front of everyone. She read it, went pale, called it nonsense, and the board voted to ignore it. I waited the 48 hours, and then I hired a contractor who specialized in fences. Not out of vengeance, but because sometimes you have to act like the person responsible for your life. The morning the crew arrived, the president screamed and called the police. 2 deputies turned up. I showed them my deed, my survey, the certified measurements. One deputy walked the property line with a GPS and said plainly that the fence sat on my land and I had the right to remove it. The president fumbled for her papers, handed over a generic map that didn't prove where the fence physically sat, and then left. By 4 in the afternoon, the fence was gone. Now here comes the twist, the part you'll either laugh at or applaud. I didn't stack the iron panels in a corner of my yard. I didn't sell them. I didn't hoard them like a trophy. I had a contractor build a 30 by 30 frame just beyond the neighborhood entrance sign, a spot technically on my property but hard to miss. We reinstalled the exact ornamental iron panels as walls for a pig enclosure and a covered compost area, the very fence they'd paid so much to erect. It looked ridiculous and glorious, fancy black iron pointed finials and all surrounding a muddy heap of straw, and a couple of pigs who cared nothing for aesthetics. Neighbors took pictures. Later, a few of them told me they'd been furious with the president with the expense, and yet suddenly, I was the one standing my ground. The HOA's lawyer threatened to sue for theft, but my lawyer laughed and pointed to the certified survey and to the notice I had given. Legal thunder in this case rolled in my favor. The fallout was beautiful in a bureaucratic way. At the next HOA meeting, they wanted explanations. Turns out their president had okayed the fence with an old general map and without a proper on-site survey. Homeowners asked hard questions about why thousands had been spent without proper checks. A recall motion passed, and 3 weeks later, the president and 2 board members who'd voted to ignore my notice were voted out. The new board called me apologetic and practical. We met at a coffee shop, yes, I met them, and we negotiated a clean, non-interference agreement. They would recognize my property's separate status and stop trying to regulate my farm. I would be mindful of the neighborhood when practical. Handshakes followed. Paper followed. Road cleared. It took a week or 2 for the adrenaline to ebb and for small annoyances to settle, phone calls from curious neighbors, a few polite apologies, some awkward waves. I still checked the gate each morning like a habit, half expecting another stunt, but it never came. I hung a small plaque by the pig enclosure that reads tongue-in-cheek, donated by the HOA, because humor softens a lot of edges. The president eventually moved away after an audit found questionable expenditures. The neighborhood's entrance now fertilizes itself in a way their landscapers never intended. What did I learn? That authority without responsibility is just paper and posture. People in power will sometimes push boundaries because they cannot, because they should. Being reasonable at the start doesn't obligate you to be reasonable forever. Sometimes insistence is the only defense your family has. My grandfather taught me to protect what you build with your hands. Apparently, he also taught me how to schedule a contractor and keep a sense of humor while doing it. The moral didn't come as a sermon. It came as a slow breath after a day of heavy lifting. Don't let someone else define the limits of your life. Measure the line, know your rights, but also try to keep the humanism in you. If you can solve things without a granite monument to rightness, do it. But if someone fences you in, literally or figuratively, check the survey and then act. I could have stacked those panels as evidence or sold them or turned them into lawn art for tourists. Instead, I built something practical, a compost shelter and pig pen that feeds my soil and oddly feeds my relationship with the community. Justice for me was not vengeance. It was a cleared driveway, a signed agreement, and a neighborhood that finally understands who I am and what I do. So here's my question to you. When someone draws a line and tells you who you must be, do you quietly step over it, or do you measure the line first? Have you ever been fenced in by rules, by people, by expectations? And what did you do? Would you have applauded the pig pen or called it petty? Share your story. Tell me what you learned or what you'd have done differently. Sometimes standing up for what's yours is less about triumph and more about teaching the people around you how to mind their own yards.